Kleine Enttäuschung vorweg, es wird kein Vortrag, es wird ein Gespräch.
Hi everybody. Sorry I don't speak German. I feel terrible, but yeah, I kind of getting the idea that what it's like for foreign language speakers to like watch English content. I do appreciate that a lot more, having sat up there and not having any idea what anybody on the stage was talking about because it was all in German. So.
Yeah, so you have a good moral reason for not paying attention, which is maybe relieving the consciousness a little bit, because a conference is always like you don't want to miss anything, but of course there's a lot of things going on. So Jimmy, great pleasure to talk to you. We have a very deep topic, so let's get right into it. Let me ask you, I mean, you've been in Bitcoin for a while. Was it at the beginning, like, was it mainly a technological interest, was it economic interest, investment, or was it right from the beginning a revelation kind of experience where you saw the moral appeal, how it's going to be improving the world? How was it for you, the initial reaction to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I heard about Bitcoin back in 2011. So this, I think the headline that I read on Slashdot was, internet-only currency Bitcoin reaches dollar parity, right? Like, so it had just broken $1, and this was February of 2011, I think. And when I saw it, it made sense to me. Like, given the background that I have, I started studying much more on economics after 2008 and the great financial crisis that happened then. And I was interested in the topic of, what is money and monetary creation and economics and all that. So I was primed that way. And the other side was the technical, which, I'm a programmer and have been since I was like 9 years old. So when I saw it, it made sense. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I had a vision of making this moral case for Bitcoin or anything like that. That didn't come until later, but I think I was better positioned than most people in just sort of getting it right away because of the economic and programming aspects.
Yes, I mean, the great financial crisis was quite a trigger for many people. Did you see it as a moral crisis at the time as well, or was it mainly just economics and hard to figure out what's going on?
Yeah, I think it was a moral crisis, although I don't know if I would have explained it that way at the time, but I do remember feeling like, okay, how is this allowed to happen? And this is a reaction that you often get when you explain to people how the current monetary system works. Wait, banks can loan money they don't have and then sell those loans afterward? How is this fair? But, the thing that really woke me up to it was, I think it was October of 2008. And I was watching the news about, okay, all these things are about to collapse and we have to have these TARP bailouts. And the number I heard at the time was $800 billion, right? Which at the time seemed like just an unreal number to me. Like, how can you have such a big number? Like, do that many dollars even exist? Like, it was just so confusing to me. And then, I learned more about it and I realized, okay, they're just sort of making all of this stuff as they go. It's almost like, the quote that really kind of triggered me was, I think it was Ben Bernanke, and they were asking, okay, how, taxpayers are going to have to pay for $800 billion. How's that going to work? And then he goes, well, actually, we're not going to collect it from taxes. This money just comes out of thin air, basically. And I was just like, what? Like, how is this allowed to happen? So, yeah, I think it definitely was very moral in that sense.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people, when they first hear about Bitcoin, they potentially see maybe the investment appeal and so on, but a lot think that there's some probably immorality behind it, maybe scammy, dodgy. Why do you think that's the case, that there's like the initial reaction, not immediately seeing as something morally better, so it may be economically more interesting, technologically interesting, but morally there's a suspicion, I'd say, there's a general moral suspicion. Where do you think does that come from?
Yeah, there definitely is a suspicion, and that's the initial reaction for a lot of people because they don't understand money, right?
Okay.
And that's the first thing that I try to tell people when we're talking about the moral case for Bitcoin, or even just Bitcoin in general, is do you actually understand how the current system works? Most people think, okay, you deposit at the bank and get 3% interest, and they lend it out at 5%, and they make the difference. It's actually not how it works. There's all these layers of fractional reserve banking, and then when you explain to them that, they're like, wait, why are they allowed to do this? Like, that just sounds so incredibly unfair. I'm like, exactly, yeah. Then they can understand the case for Bitcoin. But because they don't know that, it just sounds to them like, okay, there's a lot of shady people going into this thing. There's people buying drugs or whatever, and that's the impression that they have. And they don't understand what it is. And honestly, a lot of it is due to sort of mainstream confusion around the issue. A lot of no-coiners, honestly, sort of have cast Bitcoin into this illegal money laundering kind of like box. There's also a lot of confusion sown by, altcoiners, right? There's a lot of them that, make the environmentalist case, or, hey, this is, Bitcoin isn't really decentralized. You look at the wealth distribution and stuff like that. They're essentially sort of appealing to maybe a more socialist ethic or something like that as a way to defame Bitcoin. And unfortunately, that's gotten out to the public, and that's how a lot of people think of it.
Okay, so you really think that it's, to a large extent, within the crypto space that people make the case that Bitcoin actually is immoral, and not so much outside?
Yeah, and this is the surprising thing. There was a tweet like a few weeks back that I read, and I was instantly like, okay, yeah, that's correct. And I think it was by Not Grubels on Twitter, and you can go look up the tweet. But he said, when I got into this space, and he was also a pretty early Bitcoiner, I thought that the people that would denigrate Bitcoin or bad talk Bitcoin would be the no-coiners. It's like, no, by far it's been the altcoiners. Okay. And the thing that altcoiners have an incentive, monetary incentive to do is to do like two different things at once, which are kind of a contrast. One is to associate themselves with Bitcoin, to sort of get all of the positive, decentralized narrative for their coin, and at the same time denigrate Bitcoin and make Bitcoin seem like this evil thing and that they're the better thing. So there's both sort of like a conflation between Bitcoin and altcoins that they do, and also sort of like putting a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there about Bitcoin so that they look better in comparison. And this has been the strategy of a lot of these altcoins. And you can see it. You just follow the money. Look at what Ripple's done, for example. They've given millions of dollars to all sorts of different organizations. And it's not just like the Greenpeaces of the world or places like that. But even like 5 years ago, they gave something like $2 million to every university, including my alma mater, the University of Michigan, where they were like, hey, you should write articles on how beneficial Ripple is. So when I got my alumni magazine, the cover said Ripple, why it's like the new revolution. It's clear that they, in the article, they were trying to make Ripple out to both sort of associated with Bitcoin for its good attributes, but at the same time make it look bad in comparison because they use proof of stake or something like that. And this is their strategy, and there's a clear financial incentive for the people in the altcoin space to do it, and this is why they're much more interested in putting out misinformation about Bitcoin because they have a financial incentive to do so.
Okay, I mean, most altcoiners probably would claim that you've been so toxic towards them, and now it's a kind of reaction, that's why they dislike you. But you're actually claiming that part of the moral case for Bitcoin is that altcoins are immoral, or the people behind altcoins are immoral? Are you really making that case?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason is they're basically trying to be their own central bank. you know, what we say in Bitcoin is you can be your own bank. With an altcoin, you can be your own central bank by being the issuer. And you can change the monetary supply. You can expand the monetary supply. They usually do it beforehand with a pre-mine, and then, you know, release it in trickles later on as they need to, so that way it doesn't look like inflation or whatever. But that's their main strategy, is printing their own money. And they, of course, they have tremendous resources as a result of being able to print their own money. And they've gotten a lot of VCs into the game. So they'll often sell a lot of the pre-mine to VCs who get it at a tremendous discount to retail, often 10, 100x cheaper than retail. So by the time the liquidity event comes along, they can sell it for a tremendously large amount of profit. And VCs are already very good at marketing things, and they've got some level of built-in trust by the public because maybe they invested early in Google or Facebook or whatever. So they're able to leverage that trust that people have for them to muddy the water significantly and make it seem like all coins are the same as Bitcoin, and that you can buy their altcoin and profit tremendously, when in fact they're really taking their money. They're doing what central banks do, which is steal from, you know, ordinary people as a way to profit themselves. And sadly, this has not been good news, especially for some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world.
So what would you say is mainly the immoral fiat system expanding into crypto, or is it actually worse than fiat? How far would you go?
I would probably say that fiat is still more evil, just because of the level of control that they have, and you know, the force of law and violence that they can impose on others. But altcoins, I have no doubt if they had the opportunity, they would exercise just as much, sort of, you know, demolishing of individual liberties and so on for their own benefit. But the thing that really gets me about altcoins is that they really exploit the most ignorant people, and these tend to be the very poor people. I was reading about how you know, crypto trading is just so popular in Iran right now, which kind of makes sense because they're under sanction, and you can see, you know, from the outside how much benefit that would have for the people of Iran, because, you know, they're under sanction. You know, it's not necessarily their fault. You know, it's their leaders' fault for these sanctions, and they still need goods and services. So they have a savings vehicle, and they have a currency that's inflating away very fast. So this can be a hugely beneficial thing. Yet right now, the most popular coin that gets traded continuously in Iran is Ripple. Ripple, a complete pre-mined piece of crap security that everyone wants to trade over in Iran because it has a low unit cost, right? Like they think it has
cheap.
much more room to grow, despite the fact that there's literally like trillions of units of it. So for them, you know, they've turned. There's like such a contrast between those things. You have a savings technology that allows you to be self-sovereign over your own wealth, and then you have this degenerate trading vehicle, and that's what, you know, the Brad Garlinghouse, you know, funds his lobbying efforts in D.C. and hires all these lawyers and, you know, pays Greenpeace on, is from the backs of Iranians that don't know any better, and, you know, they're exploiting the tendency of people that want to rent seek. So it's to me a hugely moral, you know, hazard here, having people that can print their own money and pump it for whatever reason, and they don't really care who gets hurt as a result.
But that, of course, is a very general phenomenon that fiat pushes retail people into speculation, make lose a lot of money. And the same, of course, could happen with Bitcoin, people entering at the highest price, being kicked out when it corrects, and then maybe moving on to other crypto coins.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of this fiat mentality sort of penetrating all of it. And I do blame fiat for priming a lot of people to want to rent seek, I guess. And by that I mean, just taxing some transaction without providing any value. There's an instinct for that because it's so prevalent in fiat. The people that most people are jealous of or envious of are the people that seem to do very little and make lots of money. Like an investment banker, you made $400 million doing what? Like pushing buttons on a computer? That seems like really easy. I would love to have that job. Or you made $50 million doing this or that, and it seems very easy. And that's the opportunity that fiat presents to a lot of people is, hey, you too can be a rent seeker and make a lot of money doing very little work. And honestly, this is the attraction of something like proof of stake as well, is that you can do very little work and you can still make money. You just have to lock these coins up and do exactly what we say. And if you are compliant, then you can make all of this money. That's the essence of all of these schemes is, and it comes from fiat. It comes from this mentality of you don't have to work, you can just live off the labor of others, and you can push paper around, and that will count that as work somehow. And that unfortunately is like this is all of the altcoin space. Nobody's providing value to anybody. It's all a rent-seeking game. So in that sense, it's like a hyper-fiatization, right? Like it's fiat taken to the next level, where at least government builds roads or something, right? With altcoins, they're building complete nonsense that doesn't provide value to anyone, and it's like the next level of fiat.
Well, Jimmy, let's go to the positive side, okay? So what's the moral case? What does make Bitcoin a morally better money than all the alternatives?
Yeah, so for me, the main reason why Bitcoin is more moral money is because it is difficult to steal. So from a property rights perspective, it's more difficult to seize than even something physical. So gold was, for a long time, very good money because you possessed it, that was it. But even that could be taken away. Someone could take it, point a gun at you and take it away. At least in the US, you had Executive Order 6102, which seized all gold from private owners. You couldn't have more than an ounce of gold, and at the time, I think gold was trading at, or gold was $20.67 bought you 1 ounce of gold. FDR, of course, changed that to, I think it was $35 a year later. He had to go through that because of the gold's physical presence and it actually being possessible. With the digital dollar and fiat money in general, that's now a lot easier. You can just press a button at the central bank and print another $2 trillion or whatever you want at any time. So fiat money is much less moral because it makes that much easier, and it makes doing immoral things so incredibly easy, right? Like not providing value to anybody or taxing transactions without providing any value, which is the function of almost every bureaucrat out there. Instead, you have Bitcoin, which is more moral because it makes it very difficult to steal. And I liken it to something like a belief, where you could keep Bitcoin in your head if you wanted to. And if you were determined to do so, you could make it so that they can't take your Bitcoin. And I have personal experience with this, actually. I was an expert witness in a divorce case. And I was, the lawyer for the wife didn't know anything about Bitcoin, so he hired me to represent the wife. The husband was the one that had, had a bunch of Bitcoin, and he was telling the judge, like, I don't know where this Bitcoin went.
I lost it all in a boating accident.
I don't know where it is. And the judge was like, well, you better give it to you because I'm going to throw you in jail. Now, it turned out that he had like a bunch of Bitcoin, like a significant amount of Bitcoin. And he decided, you know what, how long can you hold me in contempt? And he found out from the lawyer it was 6 months. So he decided to go to prison for 6 months so that he could take it. Now, he was a shady guy, and there are all sorts of things that he did wrong that the judge was able to punish him in various ways, but they never got the Bitcoin. And the thing is, he disappeared shortly after the divorce was finalized. And then I did some on-chain forensics. I found out where the Bitcoin was, and he claimed he didn't know where the key was, that the coins would never move again because obviously he couldn't remember, where it was or how it was. A week after the divorce was finalized, I saw it move. So, it was pretty clear to me that he had possession of that Bitcoin, and there was nobody that could get it from him.
Jimmy, you're aware there's a problem with that example. Because, I mean, most traditional approaches to morality would see morality as having a social function, highlighting dependency of people. I think most tradition would assume that it's the husband here being the immoral guy and it's not stealing. So how do you counter that? It's actually this principle of self-sovereignty. It can't be taken away from you. Most religious approaches would claim, okay, probably that's a sign of immorality because you're excluding yourself from society. You have a lot of duties towards your wife, potentially, the mother of your children, and so on. So it's usually duty-based approach. So it's either a different conception of morality or you have a different argument here.
Yeah. So I would say that, the force and violence that's required for that sort of other set of morality, where you entrust one entity with enforcing all of that, right? And this is basically what government does, is they are in charge of punishing the wrongdoer in some way, shape, or form. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Where it becomes bad is when they abuse that. And unfortunately, that has been done to enormous evil. I don't need to come up with the historical examples. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with many historical examples here in Europe. But that's the problem, is that when you entrust one entity with that much power, then they start to abuse it. And I'm a Christian, so for me, the moral case here is that, the punishment, the punisher can't be all powerful, right? Like, unless it's God. And in that sense, when you make the argument, well, government should control everything so that they can punish all the evildoers. Well, now they can punish all of these things that are not entirely clear that you're doing something wrong. And in fact, if you look at places like China, they will punish you for being a Uyghur, right? Because they suspect that you might have designs on overthrowing the government just because of the ethnicity that you happen to be. And it's a very quick and slippery slope to tyranny. And for me, the individual liberty and the freedom that we have, the rights that we have, are God-given, and they're not. You can't take them away from people, just willy-nilly, as governments tend to do when they have this power. So having property rights, like really secure property rights, I think is at the heart of all of this. And that's the heart of this morality that we're talking about, is the stronger your property rights are, the more moral the society is, because the more difficult it is for someone to take things without, your consent or something like that. Now that's not to say that sometimes when you violate other people's rights and say you steal it, like you don't deserve prosecution. Of course you do. And if you don't pay it back, pay back for the crime that you did, then you deserve some form of justice and so on. But that's almost a separate issue than the property rights, because from a monetary perspective, if you give somebody the control over the money so that they can punish whatever perceived evil doing that the central controller has, that's a greater evil than allowing some person that you don't think might deserve it to keep their property.
Would you claim that the main contribution of Bitcoin for a better world is actually making violence less worthwhile? Or is there anything else or equally important?
Yeah, I think making violence, pay off less is definitely a big part of the morality of Bitcoin. Because if theft is easy, then they're essentially committing violence against you. And that's unfortunately the case with every altcoin is the theft is off the charts, right? Like you hear about exploits and, people running off with lots of money like Do Kwon did recently or whatever. That's very, very easy in those other systems. And not having that ability to inflict violence, it makes it more moral. And if we can treat each other better, and in a sense it's very difficult to do the wrong thing, then it's a more moral system. And if it's easier to do the right thing, which is provide value to others, and I behave honestly, basically, then that's a more moral money, whereas fiat does the exact opposite.
Do you think that using Bitcoin changes the people using it? Does
Yeah.
it make them more moral, really?
I think so. And this is something that I've observed. And I think there was a presentation I wish I could have understood earlier today about the changes that you experience as a result of Bitcoin. I know for me personally, it's given me a much more longer-term perspective, or low time preference, as we say in Bitcoin. And that's a very important thing for the building up of civilization, because having low time preference, having capital accumulation, the ability to save, allows you to build, more capital-intensive goods, better stuff, right? I think I know you're going to interview Saif later today, but in his book, The Bitcoin Standard, he gives the example of being a fisherman, right? Like if you catch with your hands, you might catch like 1 or 2 a day, and that's very inefficient. But you don't need any tools. But if you make a fishing pole, which is and it takes you like a week to make it, you might catch like 5 or 6 fish a day. If you make a boat, which might take you a month, that might catch you way more fish in a day. Up to the point where today you have a fishing vessel that takes like 5 years to make, but those catch like tens of thousands of kilos of fish every single day with a crew of like 12 people, right? Which is enormously efficient. That's how we build up civilization. And I think that's the ethic that when you have a sound money, people tend to learn. And, a lot of Bitcoiners I know are very low time preference and think about the future quite a bit, about building citadels and having large families and leaving a legacy and things like that. Those are all civilization building behaviors. And ultimately, I think that's better for everybody rather than, the altcoin, let's go find the next airdrop and get bribed or something like that. Like it's a very high time preference behavior that we see in the fiat world, which unfortunately draws from all of the capital that's been accumulated and breaks down civilization by destroying stuff like trust, which unfortunately is being drawn down right now.
Jimmy, you brought along your 6 amazing kids. Is Bitcoin actually a life giver? Do you think that Bitcoiners in the long run will have more kids? And could it be one of the moral cases for Bitcoin?
I think so, because having kids is definitely a long-term investment. Right? Like, it's not going to pay off in the short term because you have to change diapers, feed them, and you lose your social life and all kinds of things like that. But in the long term, it's an excellent investment. It leaves a legacy. It essentially lets you, in I guess some metaphysical way, to live forever because they're living on your behalf, and you can leave a legacy. So that's something that I've noticed with a lot of Bitcoiners, is that they do think about the years after they die, and that's an important way in which you build civilization. If you don't care about, what happens to civilization after you die, then you're not going to do you're not going to build up civilization in any meaningful way. Whereas if you have children and you have an incentive to make the world better after you die, then yeah, you're going to build up civilization, make better things instead of scamming everyone and, you know, oh, I have my own $1 billion from this altcoin sale and now I can, you know, like party it up and, you know, snort coke and buy Lambos or something. You know, like that, that's unfortunately the mentality of the high time preference altcoiners, whereas the, you know, low time preference Bitcoiner idea is to live for, you know, tomorrow and make sure that you, you know, do things that build things up because you want to leave a legacy.
Well, I think that's probably the strongest moral case for Bitcoin there, being a base for building up civilization. What more can you wish for? Jimmy, thanks a lot for the great conversation. We only had little time. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.